Right, well, let's get stuck into Reform's policy announcement today on an immigration tax. I know we've got Richard in the studio, but let's hear him as he launched it earlier today.
The British economy, our great economy, it has a deadly, deadly addiction. That's the harsh truth. It's the drug of cheap overseas labour. And the cure is an employer immigration tax. So what we need to do is we need to incentivise business to say, actually, if you want to employ people from overseas, that's fine, but you've got to pay a price for it.
Well, the man himself joins me now in the Westminster studio. Nice to see you, Richard.
Good to see you
We're putting
too.
in the hours, aren't we, you and me?
Absolutely, it's got to be done. We're on the campaign trail. It's great fun.
Make hay while the sun shines.
A little bit of sun, a little bit of rain.
Right.
But this was a really important announcement. And you might say it's a surprise to be thinking of something where you actually need to raise tax.
Yes.
But it's really important. As you saw from the clip there, the truth is that the business community have become addicted to cheap overseas labour like a drug, and there's no contribution. It's unfair on British workers because the cost of housing, the cost of our infrastructure, which we've all paid for as taxpayers for decades, and yet what actually mass immigration, it's basic supply and demand, it depresses wages. It suppresses wages for British people, and that's what we're seeing, and that's the reason why we've had almost zero real wage growth for 15 years, and why we're in the longest recession per person, which is what really matters, over the last 2 years, because of mass immigration. There is a direct link, and yet business don't need to pay for training, for example, and all of these things. So we're saying to business, we're saying, look, the choice is yours, but you have to recognise that part of your responsibility to our community and our society is to train up and progress and pay the right wage for British workers.
Let's delve a bit more into some of the detail, because there's a few aspects to this policy that aren't clear to me. So I do think that you're open to the attack line that you're now taxing business more, not less. And you have been banging on about bringing corporation tax down. So that seems slightly counterintuitive to me. I mean, you're actually taxing businesses more now. That's the proposal.
That's a proposal. And if business didn't change their current behaviour, then that would generate additional, about over an electoral cycle, about 20 million. But that would then be invested in apprenticeships and training for young people. But businesses have the choice. So we're saying to business, we think that you should do more for young British people who are currently trapped on that cycle of do I work, don't I work on benefits.
There's plenty of businesses that put adverts in where they need to in recruitment agencies and the local press and all the rest of it, and they can't get the British workers because they don't want to do certain kinds of jobs.
I don't accept that, because the reality is that we know it worked in the 80s and 90s before mass immigration. What's happened is that businesses have got away with paying lower wages, and it's very simple, basic economics. If you can't find the labour, you've either got to offer a higher price or you invest in capital equipment to improve the productivity to replace the labour. That's what's happened for 200 years until mass immigration came in the last 20, 25 years.
But if you're charging businesses more tax on those migrant workers, then you could arguably say that they'll have less money to pay on wages in general to employ British workers.
No, what history shows is actually, if they can't afford it, they'll invest in capital equipment, they'll improve productivity. We've got a productivity crisis, and all the experts are puzzling, scratching their noses, saying, how does this work?
How do you judge how you identify the worker being a migrant? Are you saying that they...
Non-British passport holders.
Yeah, but do you realise that 8 million people in the UK don't have a British passport?
Well, there's about 4.4 million foreign nationals in work, according to the ONS. So that's...
I know, but there's quite a surprisingly large proportion of working adults in this country that don't actually have a passport because they don't travel. So how would you deal with those?
Look, that's what we're looking at. It's for business to come back and say, have you looked at this?
Why is it for business to come back and give the details
because,
of your
Because
proposal?
that's what we put forward a proposal, and then business say, we understand what you're trying to do. It does work here, but it doesn't work there. We're saying, for example, right, there would be an exemption for healthcare, of course, and social care.
Because
that's sensible.
But equally, settings have got a huge number of foreign
absolutely,
workers.
And that's great. So that's why we've got that exemption, and also an exemption for small businesses, 5 people
I know,
and below.
But you say 5 people and below. I mean, most businesses, one of the employees is usually the director. Maybe there's also the secretary. So that takes 2 out. You're not talking about small businesses, really. You're talking about micro businesses being exempt.
But that's
how growth
starts.
Hang on a minute, though. You're disincentivising people to grow their businesses beyond 5. with more migrant workers?
No, it's completely opposite. We're incentivising people to be ambitious, to be entrepreneurial.
But you're saying if you employ too many
answer it.
foreign workers, then we're going to tax you more. So people will think, my goodness me, right, let's just keep our employee count down, and therefore you're not growing the business. In fact, you're doing the complete opposite.
They've got a choice, and that's a great thing. That's how markets work. You have a choice. Do you want to pay more because there's a brilliant person over there that I want to pay, in which case I'll pay a bit more, or actually I want to employ British workers, young people, train them up, get some loyalty, grow the business that way.
So
that's how it used to work.
Say a business has 5 migrant workers and a 6th comes in. Are you taxing the business on the basis of all of those workers, 6 of them, or just the extra one?
It'd be just the extra one.
Right. Let's bring Rocco Forte, Sir Rocco Forte, to give him his precise name, who's based in Rome. He's the chairman of Rocco Forte Hotels, where he's got a hotel or 2. And he joins us now. Sir Rocco, really intrigued to hear your reaction to this story, indeed this proposal, because I know I've interviewed you many times in the past. You know, you've got a large foreign workforce. There's a lot of people working in hospitality in the UK who don't have a British passport, Rocco.
Yes, indeed. And I like, of course, a lot of what Reform's approach is to dealing with the economy and the problems of this country. But I think this is the most crazy thing I've ever heard. And it's nothing to do with businesses. It's government not controlling immigration. And clearly it's a policy of the current government to allow 2.5 million people to come into this country over the last 2 years, when they have complete control of their borders. They can do anything. We can do anything we like with our borders, and we can exclude people from coming here. Immigration itself is not a bad thing. It's the right kind of immigration that we want, not the wrong kind. And what we've seen in the last 2 years, completely the wrong kind of immigration. 2.5 million people coming in and 1 million leaving the country as well. And they're leaving because a lot of them are leaving because conditions in this country are not very attractive to them at the moment because of government policy. And the job vacancies have not improved with all these people that have come in. I have 2 hotels in the UK, Browns in London and the Balmoral in Edinburgh. Browns in London, 60% of the people who work there are not English. They don't have English passports. They're all people who stayed after Brexit and have pre-settled or settled status. So am I going to be taxed for employing those people? In Edinburgh, it's 40% of the workforce is British. 40% is British. 60%, no, sorry, 47%.
No, I know what you're saying. 40% is British and 60 isn't. Yes.
These, I have very good training schemes, development schemes. I go to all the English hotel schools and training colleges. We advertise for labour. We employ the best people to do the jobs. The wages we pay are well above minimum wages. They're not wages on the breadline, and people who are foreign workers we employ are living in this country and have to afford to be able to live in this country. So we're paying very good wages.
Okay, so let me put all this to Richard, Sir Rocco. Let me put this to Richard, because you've basically lambasted this as a crazy idea, and you've made, I think, the pretty valid point that why are you penalising businesses when it's a governmental responsibility to control migration and to make sure that we import skilled workers, not unskilled? I mean, you would be saddling Sir Rocco Forte, who's somebody who has flirted with the idea, by the way, of switching allegiance from the Tories, who he was once a donor for, to Reform. You'd be taxing him to the hilt.
Well, the 2 points that Rocco quite rightly makes there. The first is that on government immigration policy, yes, we've got mass immigration over the last couple of years, which is a complete disaster, and it's been too low skilled. So I agree with him on that. But the other point is, look, we've got over 9 million economically inactive people in the United Kingdom, and we've got to get those people back into work. We've got to train up and skill up and incentivise and motivate our own people. So what we're doing is giving businesses the choice. If the business wants to continue employing, wants to employ people that it's the right people, whether it's in hospitality or whatever, then that's their choice. But there has to be a cost. There's a recognition of a cost of bringing people from overseas to the UK. And it does, without question, have a depressing effect on local wages. And that's what history shows. So, I understand Rocco's point there, but the reality is the current system is failing everybody.
So, Rocco, briefly, is this now going to affect the way you cast your vote on July the 4th?
I haven't decided how I'm going to cast my vote on July the 4th, but you talk about productivity. Productivity is just as bad in continental Europe as it is in the UK. The worst level of productivity is found in government departments, much worse than anything in industry. That's got nothing to do with foreign workers. And in Europe, it's nothing to do, it's to do with restrictions on restrictions on businesses and the way businesses are controlled. And also it's to do with the welfare system and the tax that you pay, the marginal tax you pay if you go back into work. There's also post-COVID syndrome where people have decided that perhaps they don't want to work after all. And I don't think it's a question. I don't go out to India to recruit people to come and work for my business. I'm not actively involved in recruiting people from overseas. I'm employing people who apply to me in this country. And I'm taking on the best people to do the jobs. It's a service industry. You can't invest in machinery to employ less people. Actually, you need more people to give better service. It's about the number of people you have on the job. In luxury hotels, you've got to employ more people. I'm not going to put in machinery to serve Richard Tice. He wouldn't come into my hotels if I did.
Perish the thought. So Rocco Forte and Richard Tice, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening.